There's Jade. Hi, Jade.
Well, welcome everyone to our TLI on the troubling trend of faculty burnout. Ooh, that's a long tongue twister right there. We're joined by Jennifer Fairchild, Shirley O'Brien, and Jamie Shaffer, and this is going to be a very wonderful and helpful session. I'm especially excited to listen to this today. I'll turn it over to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. All right, well, we've already introduced ourselves, I
There we go.
guess, because Brad introduced us, so.
I know, but why
You
did you want to talk about this, Jennifer?
Oh, there you go. Thank you for that wonderful segue, Shirley. That's perfect. Shirley and Jamie and I have worked on this topic for probably about 2 years now. Shirley is now a member of the Faculty Innovator Council. I am a faculty innovator and co-coordinator of the Faculty Innovators with Laurel, who's here in attendance. And in her previous role at EKU, Jamie worked with the Faculty Innovators. And in 2021, we were all helping with Faculty Scholars Institute, and we helped organize a panel about women in the academy. And we saw a need for supporting academics who were feeling burnout, especially after the pandemic. So the next step was we created a professional learning community on faculty burnout. And our professional learning community read Rebecca Pope-Ruark's book, Unraveling Faculty Burnout. So much of the information we will discuss today will come from Dr. Pope-Ruark's book. But we thought that burnout was an important topic for several reasons. And now I'm going to transition to Jamie, and she's going to talk about why we thought this was an important topic. Jamie.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see so many familiar faces. I am going to have to rely on you all to advance the slideshow, I think. So,
There you go. How's that?
Yep. We can go back and talk about the learning objectives real fast if we want.
Sure.
So today, what our agenda will entail, first of all, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the signs of burnout, because if we use the term burnout really frequently, but not everybody's going to be on the same page as to what we really mean when we talk about that. We will hopefully send you out of here with a better understanding of some of the unique factors in higher education that contribute to burnout. And Jennifer is going to lead us through a discussion of the 4 pillars of resilience, which is a concept from Dr. Pope-Ruark's book that talks about some ways that we can bounce back when we are struggling with some of these symptoms. And then we will discuss some practical strategies, as well as some institutional strategies for how we can combat burnout. We are really hoping to send you out of here today on a positive note, even though the topic itself may not be super cheery. But our goal for the presentation was to have you leave here with, first of all, an understanding that you're not alone in some of these struggles, and then secondly, that you have some tools that you can use to hopefully help going forward. So I wanted to start with a definition of what is burnout. This is a definition that was created by Maslach et al. And Christina Maslach is actually one of the premier scholars in the field of burnout. And this is sort of a simplified version of the World Health Organization definition. So this is a health condition that is recognized by WHO. And so burnout is a psychological syndrome. And I highlighted the word syndrome because it is a collection of different emotions and feelings that's in response to chronic interpersonal stressors on the job. So burnout, at least in the definition that we're using today, particularly refers to professional aspects rather than personal aspects. And there's sort of 3 key dimensions of the burnout response. First of all, it's this feeling of overwhelming exhaustion or tiredness. That could be a physical exhaustion, or that can just be, I'm really tired of what I'm encountering every day. It can be more of a psychological exhaustion. Secondly, feelings of cynicism and detachment from the job. And then third is a sense of ineffectiveness or a lack of accomplishment. And sometimes we talk about that as professional efficacy, a lack of professional efficacy, or this feeling that we are being effective in making a difference and accomplishing good things in our daily work. Yep, great. So why is this such an important topic? We know that in general, people may be struggling with some of these issues, but I wanted to take a step back and look at this from sort of a broader perspective too. So this is from a Gallup organization poll, and this was workers' burnout rates by industry. So if you take a second and look at the top two on that list, you'll see K-12 education is by far the top percentage of folks who feel burned out, followed not too far behind by college or university instruction or workers. So what you'll see is that education in general consistently holds the top two spots on this list of burnout rates, or people that felt that they were always or very often burned out at work. And you have to consider that's above things such as healthcare. And this is a 2022 poll. So even after COVID, education, K through 12 and higher education are feeling more burned out than some of our healthcare workers. Law, people who are working in law, entertainment professionals, some fields that are highly stressful, still education is topping these charts. And what we also know is that the gap is widening. So the difference between folks who feel burned out in overall industries versus education is growing. Next slide, please. There's also some gender disparities that we wanted to touch on. And like Jennifer mentioned, this did get started from a women in academia panel that looked at sort of the differential roles and feelings of burnout for women after the pandemic who were in higher education. But certainly it affects both men and women. And I think my lights just shut off. There we go. It's the same here, again, just another room. So across all industries, from that chart that we just showed, we find that 34% of female workers report feeling burned out always or very often, as compared to 26% of male workers. So there's a disparity overall as to these feelings of burnout, but also there's some more concerning aspects as well. Next slide, please. So on this chart shows the percentage of people who report a high quality of life on these different spectrums on the left there. And so the dark blue at the top is the line representing males, and the light blue is representing females. But as you can see, when it comes to physical health, psychological health, and social relationships, men overall report, and this is the top three findings are significant, a significantly higher quality of life as compared to women along these three spectrums. You see some difference among environment, disengagement, and exhaustion, but those top three results are significant and really speak to some of the differences between the male experience and female experience in higher ed, but also in other industries that are tangential to that. So because of some of these reasons, when we think about issues of equity and we think about how to progress moving forward, addressing burnout and looking at some of the factors that contribute to it becomes even more important when we want to move towards equity. So the focus of our presentation today will be on higher education, but I do want to point out that many industries are to some degree struggling with similar issues. And overall, I included this quote because when we talk about why it's an important topic, burned out faculty cannot be the teachers and mentors that students need them to be. So we talk about this coming back to the students. And when we have our faculty that are worn down and not feeling effective and feeling exhausted, our students are not able to be supported in the ways that we want them to. And if we're not looking at these issues, then not only will the quality of students' education decline, but instructors' lives and satisfaction and happiness and all these things that should matter to us in the workplace will also decline. So because we all love teaching and learning, we can't go through this without being interactive in some way. So we have a little poll set up for you all. If you would please go to this website and use the code, or you could scan the QR code. This is just a quick 1-question quiz, or poll, I suppose is a better word, about your own experiences with burnout. So take just a minute and go access that, and we will show sort of the general results here in a minute. And these are totally anonymous. And the next slide, whoever's controlling the slides, probably Brad, should have the link to click on.
Brad's not here.
Oh, I guess I'll go over there. Here we go. I'll go play.
I thought you all had the slides.
No.
And I don't know, I may have to show my screen, so we'll have to see.
Get over here.
Okay. Thank you, Cassie.
Thank you, Kathy.
That was, I was just going for, and
Yeah, I
I
was
realized
like-
I'm not hooked up.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I know. Is that it?
Here, let me share my screen really fast, maybe, would that help?
You want me to click on this, maybe?
Yeah, if it works.
Oh,
There we go, perfect.
It is.
Got it.
Right.
Yay. So as you can see, this is the results just from folks that are attending this presentation today. And I would say that we're pretty close to some of those numbers that we've seen. And I'd like to point out that no one in the room indicated that within the last year, they've rarely or never experienced feelings of burnout. And that's why this topic is important to discuss and to open up these conversations. Now, that doesn't mean that people feel burned out every single moment of every single day or experience these three indicators. But at some point throughout the past year, people have felt this sense of exhaustion, this sense of being inefficient, and just cynicism and negative feelings towards the job. So opening up some of these discussions will help us consider how we may be able to have an impact on these going forward. Thank you all for participating in that. And we can go to the next slide. Sorry, Kathy.
Oh, it's okay, I'm learning on, Brad stepped out, so I'm learning on the fly here.
I think the Google Slides tab looks like it's right next to the tab at the top.
There we go. Well, I can't see because of the Zoom. Yeah. Thing. Here we go.
There.
There we go.
There it is.
Yay.
Perfect.
Daddy.
Awesome. So we can go to the next. Yes. And I'm gonna have to ask you to click. Perfect. Thank you. Cassie, you are awesome.
You got it. Thank you, Cassie.
So why is burnout such an issue in higher education in particular? And there are probably a lot of reasons that contribute to why this is so often seen in a higher ed setting. But there's two kind of main issues that Rebecca Pope-Ruark discusses in her book. So the first is the academic culture in general. And what I've put on the slide is sort of a summary quote of some of the issues that she discusses. But basically she talks about higher education as an industry valuing external rewards and ever escalating and often competing expectations. And all of these things are wrapped up in this idea that we're fortunate to be in higher ed in the first place. So you have all of these mounting expectations, but at the same time, we're expected to be grateful that we're here and to live up to that to some degree. So a few kind of key concepts on this idea of culture. First of all, she discusses reputation as the currency of the realm. So how you're perceived by colleagues, how you're perceived by leaders at the institution, how you're perceived by leaders in your field or discipline is key in a lot of faculty roles. Often how busy we make ourselves can determine how important we look. And so the full calendar, the back-to-back meetings, the running from one place to another place is often rewarded and often can make us feel like this is how we can justify our worth or prove that we're that we should be here. There's the concept of how much personal time and even how much of your own personal health you're willing to lay at the feet of the university. So EKU as an institution and all institutions in general can be really demanding of faculty members' time and staff members' time. And often the degree to which you're able to make yourself available to the institution can determine how successful you are in your position. And then the idea of it being really important how much the quote unquote popular kids, and again, this is from her book, the popular kids in your institution or in your field like you. So which crowds are you in? Whose ear do you have? What do the people in your discipline or your profession think of your contributions and the work that you do? And these sorts of things can really impact the well-being of faculty members. She also points out how in higher education, a lot of times we have to prove our worth through our productivity. So conferences, papers, positive course evaluations, the number of leadership and service roles, these things that drive our promotion and tenure processes in so many cases become a value of our own worth in our career. And if we see people that are struggling, a lot of times we don't pay attention to that, and people will shrug and say, well, academic work is a labor of love, and some people just, can't keep up with that pace. And rather than looking at the culture that's causing that, we're looking at where an individual may not be able to live up to that really high standard. So one thing that she does note is that peer support has been found to be a really important factor in mitigating burnout, as well as having job expectations and job descriptions that are clearly defined so that you know what you are working towards and can see progress towards those goals. And that peer support element is actually, one reason why we created the FSI panel in the first place, as well as the Women in Academia group that expanded from that panel. The second concept is this idea of academic identity, and it's obviously closely tied to university culture, but the academic identity refers more to how we view ourselves in the context that we're in. So Billett, who's one of the scholars she quotes in her book, discusses the creation of an academic self through a combination of one's understanding of what an academic is and does, as well as their interpretation of the context they're in. So it's your perception of what it means to be in your role, what it means to be a faculty member in higher education or a scholar in your field, in conjunction with the context that you're in, both in your institution, in your field, and at home and in other aspects of your life as well. And she talks about the academic identity being really fragile because success is so often dependent on approval from others. And so she discusses a little bit about how we can shift some of those rewards to being thinking more about satisfaction of a job well done or more intrinsic factors. But then again, that conflicts with some of the cultural expectations. And so as I was thinking about this, I was kind of thinking of some places in the institution where these concepts are reiterated. And a couple that came to mind, obviously, the tenured faculty and non-tenured faculty, and how their perceptions of their rank or tenure status at an institution, as well as the way that the university values those different groups of faculty, can impact burnout levels. The promotion and tenure processes themselves that are in a lot of ways very quantitatively based, and they are dependent a lot on the level to which you can show your productivity and your papers and your roles, et cetera, et cetera. And then, your own success in your discipline and how well are you connecting with others? How many leadership roles are you taking in your professional associations? How respected is your work? What are your impact factors? Those sorts of things in scientific fields. So all of these things contribute to the idea of an academic identity. And unfortunately, a lot of times this academic identity can lead to this imposter syndrome, where folks may feel like, I'm smart. I'm also surrounded by people who are as smart or if not smarter than I am. And what does that feel like to constantly be trying to meet that bar and that standard as an academician? So those are kind of the two main factors that Pope-Ruark discusses in her book. And I've talked a lot, so I'm going to turn it over to Shirley now, who will take us into the next part of our presentation.
All right, our next part is an interest inventory about burnout. It's a self-test. So let's take about 5 minutes and go on there. This is an anonymous test that we won't know your results, nothing there. It's just out there. So it's on mindtools.com. If you have your phone, for some of you who may not have your computers, it's mindtools.com, and you're looking for the burnout self-inventory test. And MindTools is a really cool site. They have some great articles on here also to help us to think about it. So let's take just a few minutes and see what we got here.
For the online folks, I did put the link in the chat box.
Oh, thanks, Jamie. I forgot about that.
They did not put the link in the chat box.
She did.
Oh, she did it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Everybody get a score online, or do we all have scores?
Yep.
Thumbs up. Yeah, thanks, Heather.
And you don't have to share your score.
No.
We don't, that's okay. You don't have to tell us. You can keep your score. That's what I do in the classroom. Your score is private. Just look at it as we discuss this. What I was wondering, based on the inventory you just took, were you surprised by your score? Was anybody surprised? Oh, I have yes and no's. Okay, some were surprised, some were not. Okay, that's interesting. I was not surprised by my score. I will just say it was kind of a no duh moment for me. It just validated what I had been feeling. But did any of those questions on the inventory sound like familiar thoughts that you've had?
Every single one.
Yeah.
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 Did anything stand out to you about any of those questions? Time.
About things like, I don't feel like I'm under a bunch of pressure to succeed, like this grant do this thing, but it's just like utter and complete overwhelm. And that everything is just stacking up around me. And I just am choosing to just push it aside and go home. And that does not lead to a sense of satisfaction with, my job and with why I'm here. I'm not here to do that.
Exactly, exactly. I mean, that sense of satisfaction, and it goes back into our self-identity again, which then gets that shame cycle going from Brene Brown. Online, anything? Anyone want to unmute and offer
For
anything?
me,
Yeah.
the intervention it recommends, the do something about this urgently. So that's kind of the score is a no-brainer, but the fact that this is actually something that's a problem that, because there's a lot of those on here, the bureaucracy frustrating my ability to do a good job. There's so many things, more work than practically. There's so many things on here. So I'll just be honest, I'm at a severe risk. So I guess I should be in this session. I don't know if I'm at a severe risk or already there, but the do something about this urgently part kind of resonated with me.
Absolutely. And I was also in that category to do something about this urgently. And I thought, okay, now what? So hopefully, if you're in that category like me, maybe we can talk about some of the elements from our visual aid here, Dr. Pope-Ruark's book. So what I'm about to share with you comes from her book, but I want to paraphrase some of the 4 pillars of resistance that she talks about, because I think we can have some practical suggestions from the book. So the 4 elements for understanding and addressing faculty burnout, she also calls the 4 pillars of resistance in the book. They're purpose, compassion, connection, and balance. So those are the 4 things we're going to talk about a little bit more in depth. So the first one she mentions is purpose. So just thinking, nobody has to answer, but thinking about your current relationship with your purpose. What is your current relationship with your purpose? And what is the most meaningful reason that you do your work? So thinking about the answers to those questions might help you as we work through this first pillar. What would you need to be doing right now to pursue your purpose? And I think the issue comes from that many of us come to higher education with this sense of idealism and determination that what we do makes a difference and that we believe in lifelong learning, and that's our purpose. So having that sense of meaning and knowing what our personal sense of purpose is one way that we can overcome burnout. Because the pursuit of a meaningful purpose that's guided by our values can help us, if not avoid burnout, because I'm sure some of us right now feel that purpose, but we still feel a little burnout. If not avoid it, mitigate it. And another thing that we need to be very wary of is striving for excellence. Jamie mentioned that already with the talk of imposter syndrome and always thinking that somebody is better or smarter than we are. And another thing we need to be wary of is saying that we are called to teach, that teaching is a calling. We can really get in trouble with that, because if you say you're called to do a profession, then your work can be all encompassing. Because if I'm called to do this, how could I ever stop? How could I set any boundaries? So that sets up the ideal condition for burnout, saying that this is a calling. Because when you have a job that's a calling, it's much easier to give more and more of yourself to it, because your work will continue to ask more and more of you in service to that calling. And we know that our culture, talking about cultural reasons, tells us that our purpose is to be productive. But Dr. Pope-Ruark says we were not put on this earth to be productive. We were put on this earth to be ourselves. So remember that you were put on this earth to be you, not a productive robot. And remember, when you align your values with your purpose, that can give you a sense of meaning. But when that alignment is off, or other people or an organization exerts their values onto you, that can cause burnout. So that misalignment, I'm teaching seniors right now in a capstone class, and we spend time talking about personal values and finding a job after college where the organizational values align with their personal values. Because when there is misalignment, that is when burnout happens. And we know that the cognitive load is very high for the social load and the emotional load of doing higher ed. So we have to be careful following our purpose and committing to our values. And that's one way, the first pillar, that we can ward off burnout. So we know the first pillar is purpose, finding your purpose, making sure your values align with the organization's. Don't let somebody else exert their values on you. But the second pillar she discusses in her book is compassion. So this teaches us to explore how we treat ourselves, but how we treat others around us as well. I know I'm bad at this, negative self-talk. I will tell myself things I could have done better or should have done differently. We have to be mindful of that and wary of that. Many of us experience compassion fatigue during the pandemic, might still be going on. I see some people nodding their heads because this is a vocation where we have compassion for our students and our coworkers. So we have to be mindful of that fatigue. Sometimes we perceive professional competition, even if it's a friendly competition, who's producing the most research, who is teaching the most students, who is winning the most awards. So there's that professional competition. And then we have expectation escalation. Okay, I've done this, now what? What can I do to be even better? So this can all lead to burnout, as you can see. So we have to learn how to feel compassion for ourselves and others and how to demonstrate that. So that daily practice of self-care, self-compassion can help with burnout resilience. Compassion helps you to see yourself as you are enough. Remember, you were put on this earth to be you, not to be a robot. You are enough. Practice that. Dr. Pope-Ruark says we should focus less on our self-esteem because a lot of times our self-esteem is based in our accomplishments and it's based in external validation, how other people view us. We should really focus more about thinking of who we are and that we are a human who has flaws, who makes mistakes, and that is okay because nobody is perfect. We have to learn to take care of ourselves. And this is more, she says, than taking a day off or taking a bubble bath or getting a manicure or pedicure. Those are just Band-Aids. Those aren't really solutions, but practicing compassion with yourself and with those around you and making that a daily intentional practice will help mitigate the effects of burnout. When I read that one, I thought, whoo, talking to myself right there for sure. I need to definitely learn that one for sure. All right, the third pillar she mentions is connection. How do we cultivate connection with people we trust? How do we cultivate connection with the people we serve and those that we mentor? And how do we cultivate connection outside the university? Because we know that connection is an important way to overcome the shame and the isolation of the burnout experience. Jamie had mentioned shame being a part associated with burnout earlier. So you have to ask yourself, who or what could I connect with to help me become resilient to burnout? And we know that connecting with people at our own institution might be valuable, and it is valuable, but it's not always easy. People have different schedules and they're running in 20 different directions. So sometimes that's not easy to do. So sometimes when we're seeking social support, the best social support can come from outside your institution because the person offering the support is unaware of any institutional politics or institutional history. They're just there to offer you social support. So not just seeking this connection inside the workplace, but outside the workplace is important too. We know these outside perspectives are valuable and they're necessary. And if those connections alone can't prevent burnout, at least they can help us mitigate some of the symptoms. And I think most of us are suffering from some of the symptoms of burnout. We know that burnout, since it lives in shame and isolation, it can rob us of connection. And that's exactly what we need to be seeking, is that connection. We might be embarrassed to discuss our burnout with others. That's what Dr. Pope-Ruark mentions in her book, how embarrassing it was to admit finally and publicly that she was burnt out and what she had to do, because most of us feel that imposter syndrome or that perfectionism. We don't want to admit that something is wrong. So it's very important to seek that connection both inside and outside the university. And the fourth pillar from her book is balance. And I love this one because she says, this is where we go above and beyond that trite advice. Take a nap, get a massage, take a bubble bath, go on vacation. Yes, all of that is short-term self-care, and it is good in the moment because it will alleviate some symptoms of burnout in the moment, but burnout runs deeper than just that temporary self-care. So how do you pursue personal and professional vitality? Well, you have to learn to set boundaries. Here's a big one. Do not over-identify with the job as who you are. I think so many in the academy do that. We identify, I'm a teacher, that's who we are, but it's also it's a job. And we also need to learn to cultivate hobbies and non-academic pursuits, because many of us are guilty of seeing work as our whole life. Work is who we are. It's in the back of our minds, even when we're trying to relax and enjoy ourselves. So there are many stories in the book that talk about this and how the pandemic amplified this. When work was home and home was work and you never left your house, it was very difficult to turn off my brain about work because my computer was sitting in the corner all the time. So we know that the pandemic amplified some of these issues as well. There are stories in the book of women who are often sick at work, but they say they just have allergies. Oh, I'm fine. It's just allergies. Well, their body's trying to tell them something. There was another story of a woman in the book talking about having severe back pain to where she couldn't walk. And all she was worried about was that she had to cancel class and that she still had papers to grade. And she was grading papers in her hospital bed. Talk about burnout. That's a symptom right there. That's terrible. You have to learn to connect your body and your mind. I think most of us treat those as separate entities. But if something's wrong, your body is going to finally reach out and tell you. I have personal experience with this. When I started working at EKU, I was a wife and a mom. I'm still a wife and a mom at the time. Still none of those things are true, but I had a 4-year-old at the time. So I had a very, very busy 4-year-old at the time. I was working full-time here as a lecturer, which meant I was teaching 5 classes a semester. And I was also a full-time graduate student in my doc program in communication. And finally, my body just broke down. I was hospitalized for severe stomach pain and pain in my side. And after multiple tests, the doctors couldn't figure out what it was. When I was hospitalized, I think my blood pressure was 80/30. I didn't even really know that you could exist with blood pressure that low, but you can. So there's a lot going on. And then I realized that it was like my body was just telling me, enough, woman, something has to give. You have to just slow down at some point. I could no longer avoid resting. So we read those stories in the book and these case studies and we think, oh, that's an exaggeration, but it's not. It's true. Excuse me, it can really happen to you. So what I had to learn to do was set boundaries. And that's very hard to do when you want people to like you. It's very hard to set boundaries because I do want people to like me and I want to please everybody. But I remind myself that nobody has ever died from an emergency in higher ed. I am not that kind of doctor. Right? This is not life or death. They can wait 12 hours or longer for me to answer an email. Nobody is going to die. And that's a good example of boundary setting. Email overload is real. I think since the pandemic, the norms around that have changed and people expect an immediate response. Well, I have set the boundary and I put a tagline on my email signature that I check email during business hours, Monday through Friday, and that I'll respond to their email during that time. And I have noticed since I've done that, I've had 4 or 5 colleagues tell me, hey, I'm going to steal that. I'm like, well, please do, go for it. And they have put that on their email because it's just a way to set a boundary and to say, no, enough is enough. I need some time to myself. And you all deserve not to be accessible 24/7. You deserve that. You need to have that time to rest. Get a hobby. I think is funny for those of us, especially who have young children. Most of the time your kids might be your hobby, but hopefully some of you are at that point where you can get a hobby. Think about some things you've never done before, but you've always wanted to try. Cassie was talking about crocheting earlier. Maybe that's a hobby she'll take up someday. Who knows? It doesn't really matter what that hobby is, as long as it's fun and healthy and engaging. Because I want to end my part before I turn it back over to Shirley with a quote from Dr. Pope-Ruark. Burnout thrives in the shadows of professional shame. But when we bring it into the light, talk to one another, and drive change, we reclaim our narratives and ourselves. So now I'll let Shirley discuss some more cultural and practical strategies. That's just a nice graphic that Shirley put in for me about the 4 pillars. Thank you, Shirley. All right.
Okay, before we get started on our weather report, Jamie, is there anything in the chat we need to pay attention to?
There was a lot of good discussion in the chat. And I would say that there was kind of, the question was brought up a little bit about the strategic plan for all of EKU and kind of this drive towards excellence. And Heather Byrne particularly noticed within excellence, the goalpost is always moving. So it feels like it's always ahead of you, and it's just inherently unachievable in a lot of ways. And so how that can kind of contribute when we talk about, purpose being a pillar of resilience, I think that likewise, it can put stress on people as well sometimes.
Thank you so much. Okay, I want to do a weather report. I'm going to play Bill Mack, my favorite weatherman from WLEX. He's very scientific as he looks at things. So I want you to think about how you're feeling about your job right now in this instant, and you're going to give a weather report. So you're going to type into the chat. Is it a cloudy perspective? Sunny, sweet.
We're not in the chat.
Oh, we're not, well, we can talk in here.
We'll talk
Yeah,
about-
we'll
you
talk
can
in
just
here.
tell us.
So let's see what we've got going on. What are some of the things that are coming up in that chat? How would you respond to that?
How technical is he? I don't know. He said he
Bill Mack, oh, he's fun.
Like, is it cloudy?
Cloudy, sleety.
Windy?
Nah, you didn't get there.
I'm gonna say windy you have to have sunscreen.
Windy with sunscreen. So there's some hope there for sunniness.
We do have a couple in the chat as well, Shirley.
Go, Jamie. Oh,
Yeah,
Jamie.
I don't know if y'all can read it or not, but cloudy with a chance of meatballs. That was from Cassie.
I love it. Humor.
Yes.
That's good.
Sunny but tired. Partly sunny with occasional pop-up thunderstorms. Chaotic a la Twister, cows flying around, etc. Today's weather is windy and coming from all directions. Stormy with a high chance of tornadoes, but now the storms have passed. But still worried they may come back.
Partly cloudy with a chance of storms.
Partly cloudy, but still, again, partly cloudy gives us that idea that there's hope there. I mean, look at the hope, even what we said, even the partly cloudy with the meatballs, the humor brings in that idea of, there is hope for us. We're looking for something positive. So
How do you know you're just not masking?
Yeah.
Somebody's rain having been there. Umbrella has flown away.
you may be happy that maybe, it's a good thing. I don't want to have that ugly umbrella anymore. My umbrella is really ugly these days,
Company doesn't exist. Like the logos on it.
one of those.
That is classic for sure.
So the idea behind here was just to add a little bit of humor in there. And as we look at practical strategies, I just did a webinar, not only from what Pope-Ruark had talked about, but it was from the AAC&U. And there were 3 participants. James Lang, who I just love, he writes Small Teaching. Everything he does, I'm like all enamored with. A woman who was an assistant professor of biology from Connecticut College, Mays IMAD, and then Todd Zakrashik, who was a physician, associate professor in family medicine at Chapel Hill. And so they all gave their perspectives on burnout. So that's where I kind of pulled some of these practical strategies from, especially looking at how do we look at the tension of excellence? How do we look at the tension of what's going on, as what Heather said in the chat about the strategic plan? Well, as we're thinking about it, we got to think about the stakeholders. Administrators see it one way, students see it another, and faculty see it another. So that as we're looking at it, we've got to sometimes just take that step backward and say, okay, let's try to think about where everyone's coming from, because everyone is experiencing this. Pope-Ruark talks about change talk. And so I put in here with the typical thing we usually say is, I should, and it goes back into that calling, teaching is a calling. And I put it in red and put a nice strikeout word. We got to get rid of I should in our vocabulary. Pope-Ruark says, I could, or I'd like to, or after I've rested, I can, are things that we should start doing for self-talk. And that should be that positive self-talk that we're all engaged in, whether you are male or female. And it's really nice because when we planned this, we thought this would be a gender specific group. And so it's nice to have some of the men in here too. So we thank you for participating, and being a part of this. The other piece about change talk is like plan, do, check, and act. It's the check part is that reflection. Am I really getting out of this what I want? How do I go back to that balance piece? How do I go back to compassion? What do I want to act on? Then we looked at workload, exploring transparently what the academic role currently is and the impact on promotion and tenure. And Jamie talked about this and this is one of my soapboxes. I think our promotion and tenure standards are totally out of line for a regional comprehensive institution. We are not, especially with our teaching loads. And then when you think about workload, we have a workload formula, but it's really contrived because we're told it has to equal 1. And you have to make teaching be more than the other 2. And then whatever's left, you decide, is it going to be service or scholarship? You make those parts equal 50%. That's ludicrous. And we have to start having some really open discussions about that and think about the culture that we want to have here at Eastern. On this webinar, Todd Zacharachik said he ran into his administrator who asked him, how are you doing? And Todd said, oh, I've been working a lot of hours, really putting in all, I'm burning the candle at both ends. I'm really producing. And the administrator stopped, paused, looked at him and said, this is really concerning to me. I hired you because I thought you were good at your job. If you're really good at your job, you should be able to set limits, go home and have a life. Perhaps we need to talk. When's the last time an administrator said that to you?
But that invokes shame too.
Yes.
And also,
Yeah.
something that really bothers me is, okay, yes, we're gonna give you X, Y, Z to do, and you're gonna do it beautifully and well, because you're great, right? You're called leaders. But don't be unhappy. Don't get tired.
Don't complain.
You should be able to also fish and hike and have a family life and have a 4-day work week and cram everything into that.
And have a smile on your face too.
And don't complain.
So yeah.
Exactly.
I'll just add to that. I totally agree, but I've seen memes about this, and I don't know the correct term in the literature, but, it's a part of the culture in the academy, and I'm even go on an olive branch and extend to say, might be part of the culture here, but I feel like those of us who work hard at our jobs, and I think we all do, but sometimes in higher ed, if you're the reward is more work.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
So
Oh,
why
yeah.
is that the culture?
Right.
Like Jennifer, when Jennifer started, I am a wife, I am a parent of a young child, I'm a coordinator of a program. I mean, like all of us, we all wear very different hats. And I'm doing all 3 of my most important roles, wife, mother, and daughter all the time, while doing my other 3 most important roles of professor, scholar, and service member. So on any given day, I'm doing all 6 in different variations. And I think all of us in the academy are, and it's just, I appreciate if someone thinks I'm doing a good job, but maybe the reward I want is not to be asked to do more.
Right.
Right.
Maybe the reward I want is just something else or great or something, I don't know what it is, but
Yeah.
it's not to do more.
I would accept one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
one
yeah.
would be fantastic.
And I think that's the challenge of the culture of what we've created related to workload in the academy. Always trying to be something perhaps that we want to be like all of our other colleagues professionally. And it's like, who do we identify with? I think we have to be very careful. And then the last one was, and this was the best advice I saw, sunset committees when new ones are added. When's the last time we have ever sunsetted a committee? That means if you're going to add something, get rid of it. And it blows my mind because what happens is that we just keep adding, and it makes us all crazy.
Yeah, I've tried to sunset a committee or two, and my reward is being put on another committee. So I was like, how did that happen? You
Or I've been told I have a bad attitude.
know, saying, yeah, how dare you ask to get off this?
So we are all here because we're leaders. So some institutional strategies that I think we have to really look at is how do we create a culture of listening? We need to use our faculty senate. We need to use our department meetings to really talk about the mental health of our faculty. Recognize and respect expertise. There's a trust factor in there, and we have to be able to give up. Not everybody's going to do everything the way we are, but we've got to trust they're going to do it to the best of their ability. Ensure we have data-driven, informed decision-making. Overtly address workload inequity. I think that's a big piece. When we start talking about how many courses are you teaching a semester, we've had that workload discussion in many of our departments. Creating a collaborative rather than competitive culture. We are infamous in the P&T policies set us up to play the comparison game versus sticking to our own timelines. Being able to step back. I mean, especially after COVID, a lot of people were offered, did you want to extend your tenure clock? Most people said, no, I can't do that. I mean, we've got to begin to think more flexibly. We've got to work together to reframe, and our willingness to take action has to be there. We've got to be able to think about how can we look at this from a different perspective? Which then leaves me with the question of, what do you need to flourish? That really should be the question we should be asking ourselves as we get ready to start fall semester. What do I need to flourish? And what am I willing to negotiate to allow myself to flourish?
Shirley, I think Kelly has her hand raised, and we do have a chat comment too.
I was just going to build a little bit on, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
On what Shirley was saying in terms of the PNT process and why is everybody evaluated on the same strengths when everybody has different strengths? So let's, a faculty member might be fantastic at teaching and not as interested in scholarship. So why have them spend time focusing in an area that they're not as talented as and let them spend more time focusing on their classroom? Or in some cases, in some fields, maybe research is more important. Why is it so fixed? I wish there was some more flexibility for faculty to focus on the kinds of work that gives them energy, because to be honest, you could have more work than you could do in a day, but if you're enjoying it and if it's giving you a lot of energy and making you want to do it, it's not such a hardship as if you're spending time trying to check off boxes. And I know there are colleges that are experimenting with the way that this is done, and I wish we could have a conversation as a whole university instead of within each college, because it's also unequal between the different colleges the way they do it.
Kelly, that's a great point. Really looking at this more from the distribution of effort as an institution. Brett.
Yeah, we had a great comment in the chat. This is from Donna. So I was talking to a colleague at another institution this weekend about why it feels like we are working so much harder than it did 10, 15 years ago. She says she thinks it's part of it is the extra work required for more evidence-based teaching strategies, active learning, etc., compared to lecturing, and the fact that workloads have not changed to reflect that.
That's a great point, Donna. It definitely workloads have not changed at all, and if anything, they've increased.
It's interesting, we got a survey recently about 4-day work week. That actually makes my days longer.
Yeah.
Which means I'm gonna have to pay childcare, which means I'm going to decrease in pay.
Right.
So,
You'll be here till 7 p.m. instead of 5 p.m.
well, and it's right now, try at least a couple days a week to pick up my kids from school without having to send them to extended learning. Now it's, if I have to do that, then it's gonna make longer days. That doesn't help me. Exactly.
Exactly,
Right. I read
exactly.
Earlier Monday, Wednesday, Friday classes and versus, and I don't know why this, oh, you can go to a 4-day work week. Well, we've got colleagues that have 4-day work weeks or have 4 days of class. And look, that works for them, but that's not gonna help me. No.
And I think that's the thing Pope-Ruark says is a one size fits all fits no one.
Right.
You know, that's the critical piece of that.
Oh, sorry, I fell down on my job here near the
Yeah.
end.
Resource for all of our EKU faculty, Academic Impressions is running a faculty affairs roundtable. And it's going to be taking place between March 30th and May 10th. If you haven't seen we are an Academic Impressions university, so we could participate for free if we're at all interested in that. I know, one more thing to carve in for a day, but I know from doing several of these AI pieces, they've been very helpful. It's kind of helped me put into perspective what else is going on in higher ed across the country, and then how do we support each other. So that's just a little plug for that. And we had planned to do a group activity, but
We'll skip that.
oh yeah, but let's put it up because I
Oh,
like,
you want to show it? Okay.
yeah, I really like my starfish.
I like this starfish. I'm proud of it.
The starfish is a thing that comes from Pope-Ruark that says that, you know, we need to think about ourselves. And again, this is kind of what we'd like to leave you with, the idea of what do you want to keep doing? What do you want to start doing? What do you want to stop doing? What do you want to do more of? And what do you want to do less of? I think that would be a really healthy way for us to begin to approach the end of our semester and then thinking about our fall start. So that as we negotiate what we're going to have to do, I know in my department, we're going to be voting on committees. I'm already starting to make what I'm going to stop doing very clear.
Do you have that internal conflict of if I don't do it, who's going to do it?
That's not my problem.
I struggle with that one.
It's not my problem. I got to trust that the right people will step up, and I've got to start to back up. Now, I couldn't have said that yesterday, but
After this.
yeah. Yeah.
Left my tenure job, left a good job in the city.
But I think that's the important piece is we got to trust and we got to realize not everyone's going to do what we're going to do. So in closing, Albert Schweitzer said, in everyone's life at some time, our inner fire goes out, just like we've expressed today. It is then burst into flame by an encounter with another human being. We should all be thankful for those people who rekindle the inner spirit. So hopefully we've been the rekindlers of that inner spirit for you. We have tons of references. There's more. We like these kind of things. If you're at all interested, you'll have access to the PowerPoint. So we'll be glad to share that with you. So
Shirley, there was just a quick request to repeat the comment that was made just prior to when you were talking about, just a second ago, you were talking about the quote, but just before that, someone made a comment.
Oh, Abby, go ahead.
Abby.
Abby was talking about
if, do you feel guilty for if I don't do this, who's going to do this? And you said, not my problem. I struggle with that. And then we were talking about pre-tenure and
yeah,
how that impacts and should it impact. And so forth is, not a tenure promotion person.
Now, again, I'm responding to it as a tenured professor, it's, an administrator has to figure that one out. But, if I have compassion, I'm gonna say, oh yeah, I'm gonna do this. But I have to really selectively decide what I'm going to do within each of those roles.
You also talked about gender. There's definitely a sex difference between the service loads and who picks up.
Very much so.
Would you share these slides, please?
Yes.
Especially the starfish.
Oh, the starfish is cool. I'm sorry we didn't get to do that. She liked that. It's pretty. I'm sure Brad or Cassie can help us figure out how to share with the group. Could we do that? Share our slides? All right. Perfect.
Thanks,
Thank
Cassie.
you. Thank you all.
Did you send the slides?
To Brad.
Brad, yeah, he's got those, so.
You kind of need it if you're gonna share. We can figure out the sharing piece as long as I have the slides.
Anything else? I know we're at time, so in order to respect everybody's day, we really want to say thank you for attending today. Thank you for rekindling the spirit in us too, so that we didn't think we were kind of out here on the island, kind of floating along with Jamie where she is too. So thank you all. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
I like having people here in person too. Thank you.
Thank you.
You did a great job. We appreciate you. I like being able to look out some friendly faces.
Jamie?